Thank you all for chatting with Artworks. I'm going to start off with a question for Aurelia and Sashi. Stand up is a creative practice where you're so exposed. Why stand up for the both of you?
I hate myself. No, I feel like stand-up is a really easy way to connect with people through laughter because it's disarming and it often allows people to put their preconceived notions of what's funny to the side because they'll see someone on stage like us who you don't usually see represented as a comedian.
For me, it's just sharing stories. I think in my work as a lawyer, I worked with refugees for about 10 years, and that was connecting with people, but in a very heavy environment. And this is a much lighter environment that you're kind of laughing together with everyone in.
One time I said, "Hi, I'm Sashi," and they said, "Sorry, what?" And I tried to be helpful. I said, "It's like sushi with an A." And they said, "Susha." And I said, "Yes."
When I first started doing stand-up a few years ago, someone actually gave me this great piece of advice. They said, in your stand-up, never punch down. And I just want you all to know that that is the only reason why I don't have any jokes about white people with dreadlocks.
I want to talk about that phrase, you can't be what you can't see. And in terms of the roles that each of you play within the comedy scene, who are the people that paved the way for each of you to do what you do?
Johnny Harding, one of the first stand-up comedians from First Nations. Coley Belling also, who worked at First Nations theatre and crossed over to comedy too. Uncle Jack Charles, most definitely an inspiration to me in all walks of life and performing arts. And Professor Gary Foley. At times there's always a friction breaking into this mainstream world. Seeing Indigenous comedians telling it as it is really, really inspiring, and we needed those pioneers to show Australia and the world what Indigenous First Nations comedy is all about.
Sashi, who were you looking at as you were coming through in the comedy scene? Who inspired you?
I think I was just really lucky when I started. There were many people who were already creating safe spaces for people like me to perform in. There was Ethnic City and the Breast of the Fest. One of those really focused on POC performers, and then the other focused on up-and-coming women and non-binary performers. And it was just having that space to get on stage, knowing that people had come to see people like you.
My partner's white. For those who don't see colour, I'm brown.
Made me very unafraid to tell my stories.
What about for you, Aurelia?
Like Sashi, I was also part of the Breast of the Fest lineup show early on, which was really great. I actually did a US trip where I went to the Comedy Cellar, all of those famous venues where the lineups were just bursting with different types of performers. And that really kind of showed me that it could be possible, if not here, then somewhere else. But why not here?
I do always make sure, though, that I have a picture of myself on my CV, just so they know that they will meet the diversity requirement.
I feel like the buzzwords of our times, and particularly in the creative industries, is diversity and inclusion. What do those words look like in a meaningful way in the comedy scene?
I think it's easy to think that diversity and inclusion means including like one of each different type of person. And we see that a lot. It's like, this is such a diverse lineup. There's 9 straight cis white men and 1 person of color who, you know, if it's me, is probably also queer. And so you're like ticking 2 boxes at once maybe. And that's not it.
A good example is I think we rarely are on the same lineups together because we tick the same boxes in terms of diversity.
But let's talk about the Deadly Funnies and why it was so important for you to start that.
Hey, black people, how you doing tonight? White people, sorry I didn't know you guys were coming. Kind of like the First Fleet, my ancestors didn't know either.
I was working at the comedy festival. There was no one like me, and it was intense. Every other colour than white, they weren't connecting with this festival and how magical comedy is. Instead of being angry, I seen an opportunity to do some work. I decided to sort of program outside of mainstream comedians. Deadly Funny supports budding comedians who come from communities that make their mob laugh. And I wanted to build some tracks to that platform, to the stage.
That never works until now.
Hello everyone, my name is Steph. It is great to be here. Believe it or not, I have a boyfriend. Stop it, I know. To be fair, he's half price, he's a ginger, but...
It's extraordinary to me that it took until 2007 for something like Deadly Funny to take off with you creating it.
I remember people saying, Jason, you need to get outside and have a look at this. And the line went all down the road, right up the street, and it was all sold out. Our first gig was sold out. It's giving me goosebumps when I think about it. So I knew there and then we've got something here.
Who was waiting in that line? Who
All First Nations people in my community were there. Mum and dads, uncles and aunties, grandparents, kids, people from performing arts backgrounds, and also a lot of mainstream people there too. And it was a beautiful audience.
I love to tease him about what it'd be like to have kids together. An Aboriginal ginger? What the? Aboriginal. You could go ginger-originy. Wait for it though, because I got the perfect one. Boomeranger.
The audiences loved it. They really loved it. And I thought, my God, seeing wide audiences respond to that in a positive way was really uplifting. And I'm like, wow, this audience is ready. Australia is ready for this type of comedy.
Sashi, I want to jump to you. What's your approach when you want to address issues of racism in your comedy?
It's been a really interesting experience, some of those videos going viral online, because I never used the term racism. I'm making very light of everyday things that have happened to me, and I didn't actually realise it was racism.
Like on my first day as a refugee lawyer in 3 different jobs, they thought I was the refugee, not the lawyer.
Aurelia, I want to go to you because a lot of your observational humour is actually more about class rather than race.
There's such an intersection between class and race, and that's something I grew up with as well. And I think that helps my comedy because I can point things out that aren't as obvious to people who've never had to think about their race, their class, where they live, and the things they do.
I'm somebody who's really bad at accepting compliments, actually, because I usually get the kind of compliments by white people that are like, I wish I had your hair. I just never knew what to say until I found out I can simply say, I wish I had your credit rating.
What role has digital media played in growing, your comedy?
It's been unbelievable for me. I started posting reels in January this year, and I went from 1,000 followers to 100,000 followers in 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Jason?
I still get my head around 100,000.
You don't use social media much?
I don't think I use it right.
Aurelia, do you think that social media has helped democratise the comedy scene?
I think so. Often for comedians of colour, where there's only one slot to fill, it's really how you can kind of make sure that you get seen.
How do each of you use comedy to process your lived experiences when it comes to representation?
I think I've always used comedy to tell my story, whatever that might be. And I think that's the key. You have to already have processed it to be able to talk about it on stage.
I was once asked, how did the lack of representation of brown people on television affect me when I was a child? Easy. I didn't know what colour my ghost would be.
There's that saying, tragedy plus time equals comedy. And we all have those experiences that are low-key or high-key tragic, and that we want to tell people the things that you maybe only tell your friends, and they laugh at how dark it is or how wild it is that happened to you. And I really think there's value in sharing those stories.
I became a permanent resident of Australia last year. Thank you, it feels so good, it feels really good. I finally feel like I can now say some really Australian things. Like I can finally say the C word. Colonizer.
What ways would you like comedy to further evolve in terms of representation?
I would love to be in a world where we don't even have to have those conversations about, oh, are there any women in the stand-up scene? I just want to be in a world where anyone who thinks about doing stand-up can tell jokes.
Same as Aurelia, walking on stage as a brown woman, I can't wait until getting on stage is not a political statement. Like to not talk about diversity and inclusion anymore because it's already happening.
Jason, what changes would you like to see continue evolving within the comedy scene?
Yeah, I think the administration, it needs to change. It's really unbalanced, and I don't think there'll be too many First Nations or people of colour working behind the scenes. And this is a major issue in this country, and I would like to see a greater focus on employing people within the industry to change the industry so it's more suitable for everyone. That's got to be the next phase.
Thank you all for chatting with Artworks. What a great chat.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
for
very
having
much.
us.
Thank you.
Yeah.